Halloween, Michael.
Welcome back to The Haunted Beard. My name is Jake, and I have been making my way through reviewing the entire Halloween franchise. And I finished watching Halloween 2018 last night, and so I am here to give you my thoughts. So, the way they set this one up is they make a film 40 years later by completely sort of jettisoning everything from the Halloween canon all the way back to the very first film. So this film connects us back to the very original from 1978, and this is the sequel 40 years later to that movie. The film opens and we are introduced to two investigative journalists. They are at the institution that Michael has been at for the last 40 years. He's getting ready to be transferred to a new facility. We also meet the new Dr. Loomis, Dr. Sartain, who has been Michael's sort of caretaker for the last 40 years. These journalists are there. They want an opportunity to see and hopefully speak with Myers. And I really like the setting of the opening of the movie. This institution is just kind of creepy and eerie. And there's this scene that's set outside, and there's all these inmates that are out in the yard. And they're all shackled to these like heavy cinder blocks where they can only move within this certain sort of radius. And they're walking out there, and all of a sudden you see him, like there he is, Michael Myers in the flesh. And the movie does a really good job of kind of building up and amplifying this moment as this really significant, powerful moment where you finally see Michael Myers after all these years. And so the guy walks up to him and he's told he can't go past this yellow line, right? Because otherwise bad things could happen. Okay. And so he's got his original mask, and he ends up holding up the mask and is, trying to get some sort of reaction out of Myers just to get something. I got to say, I kind of expected Myers here to break out during this part right here and start killing people, but he didn't. So they kind of threw me a little bit of a curveball. But I think the opening of the film is pretty solid, just kind of establishing sort of the myth, the legend that is Michael Myers. Now, after the credits roll, the journalists make their way to Laurie Strode, and we get to learn a little bit about our beloved heroine Laurie Strode and what her character has gone through these last 40 years. She is living out in the woods, pretty much totally isolated, and she has more or less turned her home into basically a bomb shelter, a defense shelter, because she is waiting for the day when Myers returns. And this is kind of a scene that the screenwriters use to sort of give us this is the exposition scene. This is kind of the scene that they set up to kind of explain and sort of fill in the gaps to get us caught up to everything that's happened over the last 40 years. She basically lost her daughter, was taken by child custody services, and so she lost custody of her daughter, and she's just alone out there by herself. She's not completely cut off from her family. There's still a little bit of communication, but she's kind of ostracized. They don't really want much to do with her. She's just in rough shape. She has not gotten past the trauma of what happened on Halloween night all them years ago. And so this is just kind of the exposition scene, which typically there's always some degree of exposition in a film. And this way, it's a pretty, at least somewhat interesting way to kind of explain all the details and doing it without just sitting us down and telling us everything that's happened. They kind of have to, they kind of gave us a decent little take on getting us all the information by bringing in these investigative journalists. And you pretty much find everything out that happened by them asking Laurie Strode questions and stuff like that. Kind of just brings us up to speed. And the conversation gets cut pretty short, and Laurie basically kicks them out, and they're on their way. And so that really establishes where we're at, gets us caught up, and sort of, sets the trajectory, the new narrative for this new film. Another sort of big piece of information that we learn is that the script completely removes the idea that Michael Myers is Laurie's brother. So there is that timeline of Halloween movies where Laurie and Michael Myers are long-lost siblings, but this movie completely cuts that idea out. There is no connection, no relation. Michael Myers is just a crazy, psychopathic, evil serial killer with no connection to Laurie Strode. So we get to about 25, 30 minutes in. This dad and his son are driving down the road at night. They're getting ready to go on this hunting trip, and they come upon this bus that's crashed. And of course, it's the transport bus that Myers is on. Now, there's parts of this sequence that I like and other parts that I don't. Mainly, I like kind of the setup. I like how it's shot and lit. It's dark. It's lit by just these high beams of the vehicle, looks cool. You've got all these, mental patients who are escaped, but they're just kind of wandering around. And so it's just kind of this really creepy, eerie atmosphere. Of course, the dad gets out of the car to investigate, which to me is just one of the dumbest decisions you can make. He's like, "Oh, I just want to make sure nobody's hurt." And it's like, I mean, come on, dude. But it's a horror movie. Somebody's got to make a stupid decision, right? It just seems like that's kind of typically the case. Somebody's going to make a stupid decision because we have to move the plot forward. So he gets out of the car to investigate. He doesn't come back. The kid goes out there, looks around, can't find his dad. He comes back in. And I will give the movie kudos for making a bold move. Michael Myers' first kill in 40 years is he strangles this 12, 13-year-old kid in the car. And that's how we know Michael Myers is back. He's loose, and he's coming for Laurie Strode. Next, we go back to the journalist. They're at a gas station, and this is where we get kind of our first sort of major kill sequence. I think this is one of the highlights of the movie. I really like this scene. The girl goes into the stall. Myers is walking around. I really like the lack of music in this. It just kind of keeps it just feels more authentic. Something about that for me usually heightens the suspense, and I think it works really well here. Then we really get to see our first taste of Michael Myers in action. The previous kill, you don't really get to see a whole lot of when he strangles the kid, but this is where you really get to see the physicality come out. The guy comes into the bathroom because he sees that Myers has killed a couple people in the gas station. He goes in to check on the girl to see if she's okay, and that's where Myers just unleashes the fury. And I mean, remember, Myers now is in like his mid-60s, but he has not lost a step, and he just lays waste to both these people in a pretty intense and brutal scene. Really stuck out for me just in terms of that intensity. I think it's one of the best sequences of the film. I really liked it. And then, of course, you kind of get a little bit of fan service, which I couldn't help but smile at, is Michael goes into the trunk of their car, grabs the mask, and puts it back on. We get kind of just this cool, slow motion shot. I couldn't help but smile because Michael Myers is officially back, and here we go. Not long after the gas station kill, we get what I think is the highlight and the best sequence of this movie. And it's just this probably, I don't know, few minute long tracking shot as it is now nighttime on Halloween night. All the kids are out trick-or-treating. Classic Halloween setup, and we're tracking Michael Myers through the neighborhood of Haddonfield. As he's walking down, everybody just assumes he's just another mask amongst many masks. So he can, walk through undetected. Nobody's the wiser. He goes into this woman's house, kills this woman with a hammer. We see the aftermath of it. He goes outside and goes back up into this other person's house. And the camera holds on the front window as we're looking in through the front window, and we see this woman. She's on the phone talking to a friend. Her friend's telling her, "Hey, Michael Myers broke out. Lock your house down. It's not safe." And she's okay. And as we're watching her through the window, we see Michael walk around the side of the house. He comes around through the back, and we get just sort of that classic shot that's been done many times throughout the series where Michael Myers is standing in the background and just the totally oblivious, has not a clue in the world characters in the foreground. Just a classic shot. And she's getting ready to lock the house down, shut the shades, but it's too late. Myers is already there, takes the knife, stabs her through the neck, and that's it. And so just a great sequence there. I wish they would have done more stuff like that, but definitely a highlight of the movie. I dug it. Now, the relationships that are established between, Laurie and her daughter, Karen, is obviously there's some tension there and there's some estrangement there. And really, there's not a whole lot more to it other than it's Laurie kind of continually trying to convince her daughter, Karen, that, she's not safe and Myers is going to come after him. And, you know, she should do a better job, you know, locking the doors and closing windows and things like that. And her daughter's just kind of so naive and, oh, mom, you need to get over it. Everything's fine. You know, the world isn't this horrible, evil place, and it's been 40 years. Just get over it, all that. And that's kind of really all there is sort of to their sort of character interactions. The film, there's about an hour in, and I actually kind of wrote down on my notes that it felt as if Laurie Strode is more of sort of a minor supporting character. It spends more time sort of focusing on her daughter Karen and her husband, and then her granddaughter Allison, and just sort of her kind of, I guess, relationships and stuff with school and things like that. And so I wish there was a little bit more to the relationship between Laurie and her daughter, and I wish that they maybe would have spent a little bit more time with Laurie Strode, just because, I mean, she's the protagonist ultimately, right? I mean, she's one of the main reasons why we're watching. She's the more interesting character. I wish there would have been a little bit more time that we were spent with her. Obviously, they get back to that towards the end of the movie, but I feel like there's kind of a middle chunk of this where she really kind of starts feeling like just sort of this minor supporting character. It's at about this point in the movie where the movie starts making some bad decisions, and some of the scenes are just not well executed. Let's start with Vicky's kill. So Vicky is one of Allison, who again is granddaughter of Laurie Strode, one of her friends. She's babysitting. Again, also kind of a nod to the original film. She's babysitting, and the kid thinks he sees the boogeyman. She goes in to investigate, and this kill sequence, ultimately Myers is hiding in the closet of this kid's room. Ultimately, this kill sequence is just not executed very well, I don't think. First of all, it tries to inject a little bit of humor in it, in them showing you the little kid's reaction is kind of supposed to be funny because he's kind of been set up to be a little bit of a funny character. His reaction when Michael Myers comes out of the closet and starts stabbing Vicky, again, it's like you're injecting humor in just sort of the wrong place. Then, as she's trying to get away, she slips and falls to the ground, which to me just kind of came off as like sort of a pratfall, like it's trying to be funny.
Oh shit! Oh god! No! No!
And that kind of leads me into one of my issues overall with the movie is not a whole lot, but there's definitely a handful of instances where it seems like the movie is trying to inject, you know, humor into the story, and just none of it really works for me. And I feel like mixing horror and comedy is really challenging, and it can be done well, but I feel like where that's sort of predominantly where you're going for comedy with introducing a little bit of horror into it. And it seems like trying to do the other way around, it just is really, really hard to pull off. Where you've got this clearly very serious, very violent slasher film. It's a Halloween movie, and trying to inject comedic relief into it, it just feels tonally just completely off, and none of it really works for me at all. Also, too, this may be kind of a weird complaint, but I feel like when Vicky gets killed, and her sort of acting and screaming especially is just kind of lame. And like of all things, I want to compare this to the two Rob Zombie movies, because all I can say is that when Scout Taylor Compton and Danielle Harris get attacked in those movies, they lose their freaking minds. I mean, they are screaming bloody murder, screaming their heads off in absolute terror, and like you really just feel the intensity. Whereas this, there's a couple parts where Vicky's getting attacked, and another one where Allison, I'm going to talk about in a minute, sees the killer, and I just feel like just the intensity and just the screams and the acting are just so tame compared to like how somebody would really act if this massive dude with a mask on came at you with a knife. It just kind of lost me a little bit. I just thought they just didn't bring it as well as they should have. After the Vicky kill scene, we get this just, I think, a really clunky exposition scene where Laurie Strode meets the new Loomis, and it's just horribly delivered information of like Laurie saying, "Did you know da 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 da," and then the doctor Sartain saying, "Oh, did you know da 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 da," and it's just this really awkward, unnatural way of again just sort of delivering us this information that the movie thinks we need. That entire scene. I mean, it's only probably a couple minutes long, but just the whole thing, it just doesn't work. It could have been completely axed from the movie, or it definitely needed to be rewritten. Now, Laurie Strode and her family obviously figure out now that Michael Myers is on the loose, and the granddaughter Allison is at the school for a Halloween dance, and they can't get a hold of her. The reason why is because she caught her boyfriend kissing another girl, and they have this huge fight, and her boyfriend throws her phone into a punch bowl. And so they're trying to contact her, but they can't because her phone is in a punch bowl. And it's just it's kind of just it's just kind of irritating because like I understand movies sort of have to give this explanation for, you know, cell phones have really caused plots to have to be completely restructured, right? Because they can solve a lot of problems. And so it's like you have to write this entire, you know, scene as to why she doesn't have her phone. And ultimately it goes back to her boyfriend. And now, he's not in the movie a whole lot, but he is in a few scenes, and really, it's like, in the end, the only reason why Allison Strode has that relationship with the boyfriend, his only reason is so that they can get in the fight so he can throw her phone into a punch bowl so that they can't contact her when Michael Myers is on the loose. That's the only reason he's in the movie. Just they need some sort of reason for her phone to not be working when her parents and family are trying to call her, and it's just like, I just wish they could have came up with something a little bit better than that. Now after that, Allison's upset. She's making her way home. One of her other friends, who's a guy, starts walking with her, and you know he's trying to hit on her and say, "Oh, she deserves somebody better than this other guy," yada yada, whatever. And he ends up trying to kiss her, and she turns him off and walks away. And they're in this guy's backyard. She ends up leaving him, and he's there. And Michael Myers shows up. And this is a scene that has so much potential, and it has a good setup, and it's just executed not that great because he's sitting there, and just the acting and the dialogue during the scene is just, again, it's like this ill attempt at humor, and it just doesn't work, and it just like kind of makes you roll your eyes because Michael Myers is standing there in the background. And
Happy Halloween, Miss Joyride. I don't know, man. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to trespass on your yard and shit, man. I was just trying to take a shortcut with a really pretty girl, and I just really like her, man. And I thought that she liked me too, and have you ever really liked a girl and you just couldn't have her?
He thinks it's the owner of the house, and the whole scene doesn't work terribly, but they have this great setup because he's in this backyard with motion sensor lights. And so the lights go on, and then he stays still, and then they'll go off. And they do this cool thing where you see Myers, and then the lights go off, and then he'll move, and the lights will come back on, and Myers is a little bit closer to him. And then the lights go off again, and he moves, and they come back on, and then Myers attacks him. And it's just this great little technique that they had, little setup that they have with the on and off lights. And it could have worked really well, but they just kind of kill it with just the kid's performance and the dialogue during this and the attempt at humor. And it's like, guys, you had just this kind of gold mine of a setup where you really could have got some genuine suspense out of it, but you kill it with just the dialogue and the humor. And it's just like, it was just kind of disappointing. I will say, though, the music in this is pretty solid. And of course, John Carpenter came back and conducted the score. My favorite track comes right after this kid gets killed, Oscar, and Myers impales him on this fence post. Allison comes back and sees him, and I don't know what the track is called, but the track that hits right there, man, I thought was just great. And so there is some good music in this, and that's one of the standouts in the movie. Now we come to the point where the movie makes its worst decision. And there's a police officer played by Will Patton, and he's with Dr. Sartain, the new Loomis. Allison, they end up picking up Allison. She's in the back of the cop car. They're driving around looking for Myers. They find him, and Will Patton hits the gas, runs over Michael Myers. The doctor's all upset because he wants to save Myers. He doesn't want to kill him. Will Patton gets out of the car. He's getting ready to like shoot Myers, and the doctor takes this little knife that he's got and stabs him right in the neck and kills him because he thinks Michael Myers is too valuable to kill. He's like, we got to save him because he gives us this opportunity to see inside the mind of evil. And it's like, okay, dude. It's like, you've been this guy's doctor for 40 years, and he hasn't said a single word in 40 years. And now all of a sudden, you like think you're going to get something out of him. And why is that? Oh, because we got to bring him to Laurie Strode, because if he sees Laurie Strode, then he'll talk again. And it's just like, I thought that was just a terrible decision. That was just like, what? And I hated that decision. I thought the logic behind that decision was just stupid. It's like, again, dude, he hasn't said a word in 40 years, and now all of a sudden Laurie Strode's going to get the words out of it. Just, man, I hated that. Anyways, Michael Myers is unconscious after he gets hit by the car, comes to, ends up killing the doctor. Allison, I guess, is just lucky she happens to survive, even though Myers is in the back seat with her. If that would have been any other character, Myers would have killed him, but because it's a main character, you can't kill her. So she ends up escaping and running off into the woods to try to go to Laurie's house. Now we get the most random and unfitting scene in the entire movie. These two cops are parked outside of Laurie Strode's house, and they just have this dumb conversation. This guy's like, hey man, have you ever had a banh mi sandwich? You look like the guy who only has peanut butter and jelly every day. And it's like, oh, what is a banh mi sandwich? Oh, it's this Vietnamese sandwich with a type of baguette on it. And I went there and had them made the special one for you with peanut butter and jelly. And it's just like, what is this? Like, is this like sort of a callback to the Royale with cheese scene from Pulp Fiction or something like that? This scene does not belong in this movie. It has nothing to do with anything. Again, is this just another attempt at humor that just doesn't work at all? It's just weird and should not have been in this movie.
You want a banh mi sandwich?
A what? What is that?
A banh mi sandwich.
What is that? I don't even know what that is.
I love that about you, Francis. You're so predictable. You're like a PB&J everyday kind of guy.
Here we go.
No, a banh mi sandwich. Banh mi is essentially just the Vietnamese version of a French baguette.
Mm-hmm.
Now we get to the point where we have reached the final showdown. Myers shows up, ends up killing Karen's husband. He's at Laurie Strode's house, and they're all barricaded inside. And I will say, overall, the last, whatever this is, 10 or 15 minutes or so, I think are pretty solid. We get some good showdown action between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers, that's why we signed up, right? That's what we want. And I think for the most part, the movie delivers on that pretty good. So I like the entire final sequence. Some of the highlights for me are, again, I like the lack of music. I like just the silence. I like it just feels more suspenseful. There's just, there is a little bit of score here. It's just kind of some really sort of low kind of booms and sort of thuds, just sort of this low kind of bassy sound, but nothing too over the top. I really like that. I like that it's quiet enough where you can actually hear Michael Myers breathing. It just kind of adds a nice sort of audio sensation to it that just sort of heightens everything, and I really liked it. But the final sequence is pretty satisfying, and you really get to see how smart and crafty Laurie Strode is, and how she's set up her entire house as this massive defense against this moment right here, right now. It's pretty cool. She starts going through the house and is set up, each room with this sort of locking gate that will close off after she's cleared the rooms and stuff like that. So she's blocking off sections of the house that she's checked and cleared as she's making her way through looking for Myers. So in the end, we get a pretty good payoff and a pretty nice little showdown between Laurie Strode and Michael Myers. I did like the very ending, how they kind of set him up and locked him down into the basement, and she just sets the whole house on fire. I thought that was pretty sweet. Obviously, we know because Halloween Kills came out after this, he's not dead yet. So, but those are my thoughts for Halloween 2018. Overall, a bit of a mixed bag. There's a handful of things that work pretty good, but there's a handful of things that I just didn't think were very good, and I didn't really like some of the decisions and some of the directions that they took it in. Really, to me in the end, it's probably a middle of the road, probably a 5, maybe a 5.5 out of 10, somewhere right in there for me with Halloween 2018. But next up is our final film. As of this moment, I know we do have Halloween Ends coming out later this year, but Halloween Kills will be the final movie in this series review. So stay tuned. Next up, Halloween Kills, and we will see you then on The Haunted Beard.